So here's an example of this project. We're going to be using our names and working with line and scratch art. Okay, so for this project, what we're going to do is we're going to create some scratch art. Now I'm using this slick paper. It's actually the back of a poster. And we're just going to use regular markers and we're going to fill the whole piece of paper with colors using regular markers. So you've got to fill the whole thing. Now be careful because this is slick paper. It does take a little while for the markers to dry. Now I don't care if you want to draw in some symbols or some icons. That's fine. If you want to draw some little pictures in with this, that's totally fine. But remember, you have to fill the whole piece of paper with color. There's a little bit of a glare on my video here, so some of the yellow you can't see, but I am filling in the whole piece of paper with color. Now don't use black or brown because that won't show up because we're going to be covering this piece of paper with black and then scratching away the color. So don't spend a whole lot of time really worried about making symbols or making icons. And if you just want to make different spaces, colors, or stripes, now if you do stripes, as you can see here, I'm doing nice thick lines so they show up. And I'm just going to fill the whole paper up with color, leaving absolutely no white space. So I'm just going to speed up here and show you how I fill in the whole space with shapes, with areas, with icons, whatever you want. Okay, now that it is all colored in, put your markers away and we're going to get a black oil pastel. It needs to be a black oil pastel. We're going to cover the whole piece of paper in a nice thick layer of oil pastel. And to get that nice and thick and smooth, we're going to put it on a stack of papers or newspapers. Use the point and not the side of the oil pastel. If you use the side, it doesn't cover it very well. You're just going to cover that whole piece of paper up. Alright, now that that piece of paper is covered and there's no color showing, go wash your hands. And you're going to get a ballpoint pen. Then you take the pen apart and you pull out the inner part, pull out that ink because we don't want any ink. Because all we're going to be using is the point. So it should be an empty pen because we just need something that will scratch away the oil pastel and reveal the color underneath, and we're going to create our name. Now you should have already sketched out, if you haven't yet, sketch out how to make your name in nice block letters. And it's going to be hard for you to see on this video here how I'm already drawing out my letters because it's just going to be a thin line. So what we're going to be doing with this project is we're really going to be focused on line work, on filling a space using lots of different kinds of lines. And you can just barely make out, but I am writing my name in nice big block letters. And remember, if you need to practice on a piece of scratch paper first, please do so. However, the really nice thing about using this kind of scratch board is you take your oil pastel, and if you've made a mistake, like I've made my O's too big, I don't really like how big they are. So I'm just going to color it back over with the oil pastel, and that just essentially erases it. So if you make a mistake, you can erase with this project. So I'm redrawing my O's there so that they're lowercase, but they're also still nice big spaces. Now, that's pretty boring. So what I want to do is I'm not just going to fill it in. I'm going to use different kinds of lines. There, I'm going to use zigzag lines. I'm going to use swirl lines. I'm going to use different kinds of lines so that you can see. I zoomed in a little bit so you can see. Here I'm going to use some curly lines. I'm going to use some swirly lines. And by using all of these different kinds of lines, it opens up that scratch art, that color on the underneath the oil pastel. Now if I hate what I've done, I can erase it with my oil pastel. Then I've got this big negative space, so I'm gonna just add some fun flair. I'm gonna add a paint palette and a paintbrush. Oh, didn't like that paintbrush, I'm gonna change it. And so there's a paint palette and a paintbrush, and then I'm just gonna put some hard